everybody. Welcome to the Masterbooks webinar today. We're talking about the Mary versus Martha homeschool. And we recently in a summit had some of our experienced moderators, and the topic came up of Mary versus Martha homeschooling and some different things. Now, I don't want to make the assumption that everyone knows what that means. And so I'm just going to read the story of Mary and Martha. And so it's found in Luke 10:38. It says, now as they went on their way, Jesus entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to his teaching. But Martha was distracted with much serving. And she went up to him and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Tell her then to help me. But the Lord answered her, Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things, but one thing is necessary, and Mary has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken away from her. So a lot of times we refer to Mary and Martha as Mary's the one who's chill and enjoying Jesus, and Martha being the one who's all intense and all worried about the details. So as we begin, I'm going to ask you guys to go around. I'll call on you. If you can let me know, like, how many kids you have, how many years you've been homeschooling, and then how you identify as a Mary or a Martha. Okay. Or a Jesus. And then we may have to have some counseling, but I mean, that's an option if you feel the need to. So we'll start with Rachel.
Hi, I'm Rachel, and I'm entering my 9th year of homeschooling. I most identify definitely as a Martha. I have to intentionally, very purposefully become Mary because I'm just naturally Martha. I have 4 children, by the way.
4 children. Okay. Jessica?
I have 4 children. We are in our 6th year of homeschooling, and I would say I tend to go toward Martha, but I am continually trying to grow into more of being Mary.
Okay. You're a Mary wannabe? Anna?
I have 6 children. We are entering our 15th year of homeschooling, and my older 3 children would say I was Martha with them, but I am a Mary.
Kristen?
I have 9 children. 5 have graduated. I have a fly that's bothering me here. We have 4 that are still at home that we're currently homeschooling. We've been homeschooling about 25 years or so. 25. And I have not made a lot of progress towards becoming more Mary. I mean, I'm just going to be honest right here. As much as I would love to say, yeah, I wouldn't be honest if I did. I'm definitely more Martha. I struggle big time with being more Mary.
So we have 48 years of homeschooling experience, over 30 students. Well, 30 students, over 48 years of homeschooling experience. So I'm glad I have you guys. There's a tension, though, that exists in this story, right? Because it's kind of funny. I mean, Jesus asked Martha, can I stay at your house? Martha's like, come on in. And then she feels the pressure to serve him and his friends. I mean, okay, so how do you not get lost in the task that's at hand? And how do you not also be a little, like in homeschooling, we almost look at Mary as being the unschooler, and Martha as being the one who's real rigorous curriculum, multi-subject curriculum with duplicity. So there's 2 math curriculums just in case one doesn't teach one thing. She knows she's going to catch it in the next, right? So there's that tension. How do you, like it's easy to look at Martha and say, well, I wish I was a Mary, but you have to get the job done too. And I know, like Kristen, one of the things, and we'll start with you, when you have 9 kids, it isn't always there just isn't always a convenience. Sometimes you're just commanding to keep the ship afloat, and it's easy to get lost in the Jesus, there's a lot of things going on right now. We need to get this done. How do you balance the tension, or like where would you wish you could balance tension, or where have you moved in that area? That froze. So I'm going to go to Anna. Well, there we go. Kristen's back.
Yeah, my internet seems to be really sketchy today. It really is a challenge. And I think the biggest thing is just carving out consistent time where I can get into the word. I can, spend time in prayer, all those sorts of things. It's really just a matter of prioritizing and really carving out that time, because it's not going to happen naturally. There's just too many pulls in every which direction in every given day.
Yeah. All right. And anybody that has a question, there is a questions tab. You're welcome to post the question. And while we have the panel, we'll be sure to try to answer some questions when we kind of get finished with the discussion. So be sure to post questions if you have any for us. Anna, what would you say? How do you balance attention, or how do you move from Martha to Mary, or not get lost in extremes?
So I lean more towards Mary, where I'm more relaxed, and I have had to set systems in place for my family and for myself to keep us on track, so that way we don't become an extreme Mary.
Because that's kind of easy to just drift as well. Yeah. What about you, Rachel?
Similar to Kristen, I definitely, like I said before, I have to be very intentional and purposeful in not being overly Martha with my children. So definitely I am asking the Lord daily to show me those areas as I'm doing them and point those out to me. And a lot of times that happens through my children, because I'm so rigid that their demeanor changes. The whole atmosphere of our day changes. And so I can feel that, and I can tell, and and the Lord has allowed me to listen to he's shown me that I have to take the lead of my children sometimes. And that is something that I would not have done before. I was just, this is what we have to do. I don't care, suck it up, keep going. And you need some of that as well, because you have a goal and you're trying to get things accomplished. But I've also learned to just relax and take the lead of my children and recognize when they're struggling and I'm just being unreasonable.
Yeah. Jessica, how about you?
So I'm going to actually kind of agree with Anna, but from the Martha side of things, I also need kind of some structure. And while that is definitely a Martha thing to put into place and to have structure and all of these guidelines, I've actually learned how to put in structure that forces me to calm down. So I've learned through the years, there's certain things I need to do in order to keep reminding myself, chill out, like it's not that big of a deal. And there's been times when God has been real clear with me that you better stop. And so we've had years where I've had to be really go to the Mary side of things, which has really stretched me. And then there's been times when I could be a little bit more structured, but even in my structure, I've learned I have to kind of plan out times where I sit down and really evaluate what I'm doing and how it's working, and kind of use structure, which is my tendency, but use that in a way that helps me in the area I struggle in.
Yeah. So we face different challenges today than we did when we started homeschooling 20 years ago. 20 years ago or 25 years ago, you'd have to go to a computer. It was a big monster of a computer, and you'd click and you'd hear the welcome, you've got mail. That was our internet experience, and it was painfully slow. So you didn't you were on it for an hour. You were, it wasn't like today. And one of the things that you see is Jesus is like, Martha, you are anxious about many things. And we know that anxiety in our society is at an all-time high. And I find myself as a parent sometimes like, I'm just picking this up. My kids are talking to me and I'm just answering and saying yes. And it's like the anxiety of the things that I'm focused on. I'm kind of missing the moments. And that's, to me, that's what this story is really about, where Jesus is saying, Mary has chosen to be present and you've chosen to be anxious. And because of that, you're missing out. Like, I'm not going to be here forever. It's going to end. And you're choosing anxiety while she's choosing presence. And she's chosen the better portion. And I know for myself, watching my kids get older, I look back over the years and I think of all the nights I was distracted, watching TV, on a device, doing something that wasn't as important as just being present. Do any of you relate to that? And is that like, is it something that, like, do you have anything in place for that, or recommendations from the journey that you are on, or just, advice for anybody watching that might be in that place? We'll start, Rachel.
I do have that tendency to be distracted and have too many my hands in too many things at once, and I'm not doing any of them well because I'm everywhere, and especially with my children. 2 of my children have now graduated and are college students, and so when my oldest went away to college, that's when I really realized my time with her is up. And I still had 3 children at home, and it made me just, her going away made me realize exactly how short that time truly was. And I know we hear that all of the time, but let's face it, when you're living it, it doesn't matter. When everybody says, oh, your time is short, it goes in one ear and out the other. And even one of my main reasons for truly becoming a homeschooling family was recognizing how much time I was giving away to others to invest in my children. And then I noticed I was still giving that time away, but because I was the one distracted. And I wasn't investing in them, which was my goal in the first place, of us purposefully investing in them. And I was giving it away to other distractions of the day, whether it was planning a meal for the week, or actually being on my phone or something, whatever it was. My mom, even when they're talking to me, I might not be looking at something else, but I'm planning dinner for the next 3 nights or whatever. And I had to, again, ask the Lord to help me to be present. And then also just for my devices and other things, I had to start setting limits. As we've talked about, Martha's like structure. And so I had to actually start paying attention to, our phones give us that, this is how much time you've been doing these things. That's terrible, but it's also helpful because it made me very mindful of how much time I was spending. I didn't realize how much time I was on other things. And so I had to start planning that out, as Jessica mentioned, planning and being specific. Okay, during this time period, I am just focusing on this. So again, there was still some structure, some Martha in there, but I thrive in that, having that structure and that discipline. And so I had to implement that even in helping me to be present with my kids, because I was giving away that time.
Yeah. Yeah. Kristen, how about you?
Go back to the question again.
As far as
I got caught up in what all Rachel was saying.
the anxiety, not being present, and for moms who, like devices and phones and just the worries of life, like, do you have things in place, or what advice do you have for anyone watching?
I think it's a constant battle. You might put some things in place, as let's say with your devices, and then something happens, and so you're sucked back into being on that device. Patterns might change, and then before you know it, you find that it's taken over your life again. And I would say that probably our social media contributes heavily to the anxieties, especially right now in the world that we're living in.
Mhm.
And I think that it is important to step back very regularly and say, is it creeping back in again? And so I think that that's something just is always in play. It's not something that you just decide on and then it's done and you move on. It's something that's just a constant battle. And if we're not always evaluating, it can take over really quick. And so just having that mindfulness, that awareness, I think also, in my particular case, I really had to face that I might not be here for my kids. For those that are watching that don't know, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, a very aggressive kind of breast cancer. And it was a very long period of treatment, and we just didn't know. And so I'm good right now, but it still is always that every 6 months I have to go in for scans and I have to face it all over again. And it's not easy. And what I have to do is, or I should say, the journey that the Lord has taken me through is really relinquishing my children to the Lord, understanding that I'm not God and I can't control the circumstances. I can't control his plans, and I can't be God in my kids' lives. One day, as Rachel said, it does go fast. And, I really did try through the years, especially as my kids were younger, to really just absorb and enjoy and take moments. And for some reason, I thought if I did that, it would slow time down, but it didn't. I mean, it just doesn't. It doesn't slow it down one bit. And it is important to take those times to be present, to be mindful. It is hard. Sometimes you do have to teach your kids, hey, mom needs some space here. I can't give you my undivided attention now. And so I think that is part of it too, is teaching the kids to respect that you do have some space that's needed, and that's okay. You don't have to feel guilty for that. So sometimes the kids will go on and on and on while I'm in the middle of something, but that's because they didn't respect my time and my boundaries and what I'm doing. They certainly wouldn't appreciate me walking up to them and just start chattering at them a whole list of things I want them to do or whatever, while they're working on their schoolwork or something. So I think that we can get so caught up in all the things that we're doing wrong without stopping and saying, hey, wait a minute, we need to train our kids too, to be respectful. So I don't know where I'm going with all of this, except for, all of this stuff adds to the anxiety of doing everything right, being who you need to be. And it just feels like sometimes life pulls you in so many different directions. And we just have to stop and remember that God is God. We're not God. And we can stop and enjoy our children. And we also can set boundaries with our children to say, hey, I need this space. You need to go do something while I'm doing this.
Yeah. I think that's the tension that exists in this Mary Martha debate. And I don't think that there's one or right. I think Jesus is reminding Martha that she might have missed something, but I don't think that there's necessarily a right or wrong here. That it was just, you've gotten a little out of whack and you're missing the big picture. Not like someone says that the cycle of guilt sets in because they're not more like Mary. Well, I don't know that that's what Jesus intended. I think his intention was just, Martha, chill a little bit. This is a moment that you probably want to enjoy because it's not going to last. And Mary's kind of figured that out. And, but giving yourself permission to have room for growth in those areas. So last week you look at your screen time device and it says you've been on the phone for 40 hours. Well, okay, you need to change that a little bit, but not necessarily beat yourself up, because that shame cycle and the cycle of guilt isn't really going to help. And it's the same with our families. Finding balance in this is really what it's about, more than it is about being one way or the other exclusively. Jessica, how about you?
So I really like everything you just said, because in my head, those were like all the things I was thinking. And I saw that comment, and it kind of, that's the thing about this story of what Jesus was saying, was he didn't say, Martha, what you're doing is terrible, because what she was doing wasn't wrong. Those things, we do need to eat. We do need to keep our houses clean. We do need to do these things. That's real life. That's part of things. But there's this balance that we have to find of what gets my attention now. And this, it's kind of funny to me, because in Where Faith Grows, this story is in one of the lessons, and the kids in their conversation back and forth, they say, I asked my mom, I don't understand this, because, we have to do chores and it's a good thing to have a clean house. And they go through this process of understanding those are good things, but there's a time for everything. So, when it's time for us to go to church, then we need to be present at church. When it's time for us to have dinner as a family, then we need to be present as a family. And so for me, one of those things that kind of helps me in those areas is figuring out where are my strengths and my weaknesses, or what are kind of like triggers for me that cause me to be stressed. And so for me, one of the things that causes me to be stressed is food. The idea of having to put food on the table for my family multiple times a day is like very stressful. It's too much for me. And so a few years ago, I sat down and I figured out like a healthy breakfast that would be something that I could prepare in advance, or my kids could do themselves. And then we did essentially the same thing for lunch. And so I could do like once a week or once every couple of weeks, and I kind of get things ready for them and they pull from there. And it kind of seems silly, but what that does is when it removes that stress from my day, it allows me to be more present during the day, because otherwise I'm going, oh my word, I have to figure out lunch again. Yeah, every day. Like they need to eat every day. And so taking those things and just figuring out, well, what do I want in this situation? Because I know that it causes me stress every single day. And then even like right now, we're in a really busy season of our life. So I'm super busy. My husband is super busy. And so if we're not careful, the kids can be pushed to the side because we're so busy doing our own thing and the things that are demanding our time. And so we sat down again about food, and we set up this like super easy dinner schedule. So that way it was like, hey, we're both kind of dealing with dinner, but we both know what's expected. And so if he comes home and there's nothing really going with dinner, he can just go, okay, I know exactly what to do. And it's easy. We get dinner done and we move on with our night. So I know that that's kind of like just like a really practical thing for us. But because that's a big stress to me, that is something that allows me to be there for my kids more often, because it bothers me so much if I don't have that taken care of. So I think some of it is just figuring out for each individual, what is taking up your time, or what is causing you anxiety? What is causing you stress? And then ask God for wisdom on how to approach that situation. For someone that loves cooking, what I just talked about would not help them because they love that, but I don't. So that's why it's helpful for me. So it's so personalized on what exactly works for you. Same thing like with devices. If you are on a device too often, sometimes a curfew for the devices is a really good option. Or, a set period of time where you have like a basket and all devices go in the basket from 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock every night, or something like that, those types of things. And it's figuring out what's pulling the energy from the members of your family and causing you guys to not be able to invest in each other, and then learning how to manage that and not treat it as something terrible, because very often the things that are pulling our energy are not bad things. We just have to learn how to manage them.
Yeah. One thing I'll say for the four of you, because you work in masterbooks customer service and you've worked in the group for a number of years, there was a saying Tim said to me once when I was working on Facebook. He said, if you look into the eyes of the dragon long enough, you become the dragon. And I really remember the struggle of, I'm always checking Facebook, I'm always checking the app, I'm always checking customer service, because we really do try to provide a good experience. And that's a challenge that we have, is that masterbooks, we're very, very transparent and open in social platforms to connect with people quickly. And it is a challenge because we're so used to the tickets, we're so used to the moms group or the app, or just who's texting, what's going on, who needs something from me. And being able to take a break, the moment I put my phone down, that's when crisis happens. And so we just get trained that it has to be with me all the time, within arm's reach. And so it is a challenge. That's a challenge of where we live. So I think that's good advice about having a time where everybody knows, including your extended family and your kids that have left the house, this is when I do this and I just need space here. So Anna, how about you?
Well, I implement a lot of the same things that everybody else does, even though I'm more of a Mary, and we have rules for electronics in our house that helps me, and then it also helps those around me. One, to be accountable, and two, not to be distracted. It's easy for me I'm just going to check this real quick, and the next thing I know, I am looking at home goods on Pinterest and redoing my house that I don't have yet. So it's so easy to get carried away. And so at dinner time, there's absolutely no electronics at our house, or at our table. I'm sorry, they get put up, and we don't even answer them unless if it's an emergency. People usually call back a couple times, so then we'll look, but usually we don't even look at them. Electronics are up at 8 p.m. at night at our house for our children and for us. And electronics aren't allowed in rooms. They're not allowed in bathrooms, no closed areas, because that helps us be present together. But also we have systems in place. I have a whiteboard because I forget easily, or I see a squirrel. And the rule is, if it's not on the whiteboard, then it's not there and I can't help you. So especially with school, the kids will write that they need help. They write their name, the lesson. And if it's up there, I know, I see it, and I'll erase it when I help them. And so many times the kids said, well, I told you, Mom, I told you I needed help. And I said, I didn't hear you, or I got distracted helping another kid. So that's one system that we put in place. And then Jessica was talking about the cooking. With my older kids, I taught them how to cook. I taught them how to do things in the kitchen. So now they take a meal a week, and it takes that stress off me. But I do make myself plan. I have a planner. I have a child who loves to plan. So I tap into her and I ask her, hey, help me with a list. Help me with doing what I need help doing. So that way I don't feel like I float alone, because I think as Mary, people say, oh, it's great to be a Mary. I admire the Marthas. I think the Marthas are incredible, and they have their act together. And I'm over here looking like a hot mess most of the time. And if my kids have socks on, I don't even care if they're matching. If they have socks, it's a win. So
that's good. Yeah, I do. I believe that there's the tension. We have to have the Martha and the Mary. I think systems help us. And so that's good. And I want to stay on systems. Katie mentioned that Kristen talked about not having to be there for our kids for everything, and the guilt that comes from that. I also agree with Kristen on something, and I think we have to actually be really conscious of something. With our children, we're always homeschooling. Sometimes we use books. Most of the time we're using real life. And it's really important to understand as a child who is going to become an adult, delayed gratification. To understand that sometimes it takes a little bit longer. Like there's an appropriate time that you're going to get attention. There's appropriate time you're going to get things answered or provided for. It doesn't have to be immediate. And maybe it's not today, maybe it's a week from now. In learning how to self-soothe and to deal with the anxiety of not having everything answered right away. Because sometimes it's easy for us as parents to almost dote on, to over provide, to overprotect, to it's not real life. And then a child turns 18, 19, 20, 40, 50, 60, nothing more pathetic than a 50 or 60-year-old man who still is trying to get his needs met immediately, right? Because he didn't learn that as a child. And so I think it's right for a mom and a dad to say there are certain times that I need space, but it's also healthy. We just have to be conscious that we do it in a way that the child understands. They're not being neglected. They're not being, it's not because they're not important. It's because that's the way life works. Sometimes things take a little bit more time. So that being said, I'm going to go back to structure. And this is a marketing phrase. I was working with Summer recently. Oh, I just lost Kristen. Hopefully she comes back in. I was working with Summer and I'm just going to click in on a course. Let's see. All right. And the we're trying to get a course in the academy, and it's really stressful. And it's like we're trying to fight it out, right? And I realized, and this is my tagline that I came up with for Master Books: we do the Martha work so that you can be the Mary. And the amount of time, there's Kristen. See, I got to say this again, Kristen, because this was so brilliant. At Master Books, we do the Martha work so you can be the Mary. I've been privy to the front row of Kristen on the editorial design team of curriculum. I've watched the process. And Kristen, I was saying, I was working with Summer earlier to put together a course for the academy. And we're just wrestling through this. We spent 45 minutes wrestling through, how do we make this usable and easy? How do we put systems in place? How do we have schedules? And sometimes Master Books feels easy because we've done the Martha work. Mm-hmm. And so all you have to do is sit and enjoy the Mary work. And we've been anxious about all of that, right? Kristen, you can speak to that because you're part of the development team and you know how exhausting it is to be that, and how many times it's been, yo, Jesus. Go ahead. I didn't ask a question. I just want you to talk about it.
Well, I've spent so much of my life just with, our older kids, putting together curriculum, putting together schedules, making it work for us. And so when it comes to Master Books, we have this schedule at the beginning of our courses that make it so that we don't have to spend all this time trying to, figure out our schedules. It's easily adaptable. So everything we love our all-in-one courses. So we've learned that really resonates with families. And so whenever possible, it's not always possible, but when it is, we're trying to do courses that everything is in one book. So you're not having to manage all these different books, trying to figure out where what is. There's certain courses that Master Books doesn't have yet. And so I have to use other publishers for certain courses, and it hurts. It just hurts because, I just dread it when I can't use I don't have a Master Book solution because it's just so much work. And I have really grown to appreciate the master books courses because it's just so much easier to figure out at the beginning of the school year. And I do find that planning just makes life so much easier for my family. That's really key to being able to enjoy other things with my children, is just the planning, having that school year worked out ahead of time. Um, so yeah, I mean, I do think that Master Books does a lot. We try to keep the things that we need to be household items, having those lists of what we need for the courses, all of those things. They may seem like such a simple, obvious little thing, but not all curriculum makes it all that easy. And I think part of it is because we design our curriculum specifically for the homeschool environment versus a school.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Jessica and Anna, I know you've participated with like the Moms of Master Books, and sometimes people get frustrated because we try to keep conversations on point and not allow things to go down certain paths that maybe feelings would get hurt or misunderstandings or confusion. And sometimes it's a challenge, but you also know how seriously Master Books takes, like you've seen firsthand, when there's something that's coming up and somebody's like repeatedly asking a question, how seriously Master Books takes trying to find ways to make the course more usable. And the usability of Master Books is like so important. And St. Rachel, you deal frontline as well with tickets coming in. When there's a problem, how well and how hard everybody behind the scenes is working to try to make it so that if this is a repeated occurrence, and it seems like people, it's a friction point, then we want to remove those friction points. So I think this is going to have to be the story of Mary and Martha, and we do the Martha work so you can be the Mary. That's going to have to be in the next catalog. And because I think it's so true. And I've watched the battles go back, just like fonts, right? Fonts, the lining up of things. A page can be an entire day's meeting of how to make this more usable for a student, make it easier for a mom. And then when it gets to a mom, I think like most of what Summer and I were struggling with was the usability of the course. And I'm like, I was exhausted. I was like, if I had to do this course with somebody, I would be exhausted right now. And that's where I think this team especially is part of that process of filtering information on and helping us as a company understand how to better serve the market so that they can be Marys. Okay, so because of that, how do we counterbalance, right? Like, so sometimes it doesn't feel that difficult. And so maybe a mom almost feels like, but shouldn't it be harder? Shouldn't I be doing, like, I'm looking over here at my neighbor and she's doing, ABC curriculum. And I feel like I'm not actually playing the role of Martha enough. What advice do you have to that mom? And I'll go Jessica.
Okay. This is a big question, I feel like, but you're good at those big questions. Well, I think the first thing that really pops into my mind is rest, and anxiety is not from God. That running and that stressful feeling that we have when we have to do so much, that's not from God. And so I think we talked about this somewhat recently, maybe in the last webinar, but we have been called to homeschool. Okay, that's something we know that we've been called to do. When God calls us to something, He equips us. He gives us what we need to fulfill the calling that He's placed on our life, but we can make the calling difficult. So we have to learn that the calling that God puts on our life doesn't have to be difficult. That doesn't mean he doesn't challenge us. He grows us and he challenges us. But sometimes we can think that, well, if it's hard, then I'm clearly doing something like that's, I'm being more spiritual, or I'm doing something better than others because this is harder for me or something like that. But that's not necessarily the case. And so one major indicator for me is, do I have peace in what I'm doing? Is there peace? Like when I'm praying, when I'm reading the word, when I'm operating throughout my day, am I operating in peace? And so sometimes there's peace in a really hard situation where people look at you and they're like, how can you have peace and you're going through this really hard thing? Well, that's the peace of God, right? We know that that's God's peace, and he is helping us. He's holding our hand as we're walking through something difficult. But sometimes we can get it flipped around and we think, well, doing the right thing is hard and I'm going to really struggle. So to me, I think that's the one thing that I would really look at. Do you have peace in what you're doing? And if you have peace, then why do you want to be doing something that somebody else is doing that looks harder? We don't need to run around and to try to meet all these needs. I think when we're doing that, we're really focusing on what is appealing to man. What does man think? And we kind of are getting our eyes off of, that's not necessarily the calling that God has for you. And so remembering that God equips us and he does that for us, but we can make our job harder. And the person across the street that looks like they're doing a million things, they might not have peace doing those million things. And we also have to be careful to remember that my life doesn't match their life. And so as much as I want to say, look at somebody else, and there is, to an extent, we look at others around us and we do get advice and wisdom from them. But at the end of the day, my life just doesn't match everyone else's life. It's not going to look exactly the same as everyone else's life. And so you have to figure out, okay, God, what are you calling me to? You're calling me to homeschool. You're equipping me to homeschool. And I'm going to rest in the peace that you give me. I'm going to rest here in this. It doesn't have to be hard. And that's the main thing that I tell people when they ask about homeschooling. I'm like, it doesn't have to be hard. It can be joyful. You can have fun. You can enjoy yourself. I mean, I love homeschooling my kids. I don't ever wake up there's not one day, because I've had a lot of people who said, I'm thinking about homeschooling. I know it's going to be really hard. I know that there's going to be days that I don't want to do it. And so, well, what do you have to say about that? And I'll look at them and I'll say, I can't relate. I have to tell you, there's not one day that I wake up and I don't want to homeschool. So if you're feeling that way, then, that's not a good sign. I'm thinking you're not necessarily, like, you need the peace of God. And so looking at someone else that's running around like crazy, why would you want that? That's not, now that doesn't mean that busyness is not, there's times when we have busy seasons. I'm in a busy season, but I still have peace in that season.
Yeah. I think on a balance, on a little bit of a flip side with that though, if Martha had just kept her mouth shut, she wouldn't have gotten rebuked. Like, Jesus wasn't targeting Martha. It's because she was pointing out that Mary wasn't doing what she was doing. And I think in some places with homeschooling, it used to be really big in a culture where, you didn't have the full internet, right? So you didn't have a Facebook group, but you had 20 moms that would get together in a region, and one mom who had the strongest personality would be kind of the alpha mom. And in different parts of the country, whatever curriculum that mom believed was the best, like, there are some classical conversations area of the country where that's what you use. In other areas of the country, it's Abeka. In other areas, it's BJU. Now it's the masterbooks nation. But it used to be little pockets of the country where you had these little, this is what you use because the alpha mom said this is what you used, and they all did. And when we came into homeschooling, I can remember so many times saying to people, do what's best for you and your family. Operate the way that's best for you and your family. If your family operates with high intensity and a little bit of anxiety, and that's who you are and wired, just don't try to make Mary like you, and Mary's don't try to make Martha's like you, and give each other kind of room to have that freedom too. Because I agree with Jessica. We love homeschooling. I love the culture it's given us. You couldn't convince me of any other way of doing it. I don't know, Kristen, do you think, is there ever a day that you have a regret?
No, not one. Yeah, no, yeah, there is. Sorry. Sorry to contradict myself. I regret ever sending our oldest to school in the first place. We removed her in February of her first grade year, and we never should have sent her in the first place. And that was me. That was my fault. Seems silly now, but back then I was afraid to teach her how to read, you know. It's like the irony of that. But that's my regret. That's my only regret. As far as regretting that we homeschooled, even, I mean, I did expel our oldest once from homeschooling, but I never regretted homeschooling, and I didn't really want to not homeschool her. It's just that the Lord was doing something in that, and that was an interesting time.
Yeah.
To say the least. And when we look back at it, we do see the hand of the Lord moving us in a direction that he wanted us to go in. And so even in that really stressful, difficult time, he was moving and working. And, you know, he was just putting pressure in that clay of how he needed our lives to be molded. And I think that that's probably something that I've been able to see through the years, in hindsight, that we couldn't see in the beginning, was just how God was directing our steps in ways that we never could have planned. And then that makes me say, for today, how is he directing our steps in ways that we never ever could plan? Yeah. And so that just gives us a bit of peace. And I wanted to just kind of circle back a little bit. Jessica had mentioned seasons, and I wrote this down. Something that I think that we have to have is grace for ourselves, grace for our children, grace even for our spouses in changing seasons. And we are in one of those changing seasons. And this has been a real hard lesson for me. Like right now, I want to be at the point where we have all the things in place, but we don't. And I'm frustrated by that. So one of the issues is we've moved. This house just functions differently. My two daughters are now gone. They no longer live in the apartment. They no longer pop in. They're also no longer helping out with meals or anything like that. And we've got to reassess, and we keep discussing this. And I told my boys, who are eager to help with the cooking, and they do jump in and help. I'm like, Jessica, meal prep, I just don't have time for it. And so we've got to teach our boys to pick up the slack, do more of the chores, do more of the cooking. But we haven't gotten to it yet because this year has been crazy. We had a wedding, we've moved, along with a lot of entertaining. We have guests arriving, a big family on Sunday, which happens to be the McCullers. You know, and we've done this all year long. So, you know, this has just been one of these years, and I just can't get caught up to that. I can't get these things in place. And so even before this, you know, this live started, my son popped his head in, Mom, what do you want me to do for supper? I have no idea. You know?
Conversation we have every day.
Yeah, exactly. Now I have had some times where we've gotten ahead of it all. And so I just have to stop and say, wait a minute, this has been a whirlwind of a year. Randy helped a little bit in that. And we just haven't hit our stride yet. And so give ourselves that grace, recognizing that changing seasons happen and they don't all happen gracefully. And that's okay. We'll get our groove, we'll get our stride again. It may take us a little bit longer than what I had expected and hoped, but we'll get there.
Mhm.
And then another little side thing I wanted to mention is using technology for good. So one of the things that I do is when I'm getting ready and, just brushing my teeth and, all that good stuff, I turn on the daily audio Bible is what I use. But there's all sorts of things out there that you can use. And so don't just look at technology as the thing that's keeping you. It can actually be something that helps. And so that's one of the things that I do to help keep me focused on the Lord is that audio Bible.
Because our phones are with us all the time, I actually, for a while, needed some help developing a habit. And so I set alarms. So before I went home, I wanted to remind myself to be present so I would set an alarm for right before I walked in the door usually, and my phone would go off. And when I looked at it, the name of the alarm was be present. At noon, it was like, just give myself a reminder, be careful what you eat. Like that just helped me because your brain goes into habits, and setting alarms like that kind of helped me develop some new habits by just waking me up to, oh yeah, I want to be present when I walk in the door or that type of thing. So I agree. The technology can also be a tool that can help us do that. So, Michelle asked, because life happens and we use masterbooks is designed for real life, but she said when you feel behind because you've had to take a long break from schooling due to outside circumstances, it almost feels like we're behind and need to catch up. How do you address the issue of hurry and wait with homeschooling because life happens, and so there's a season where you fall a little bit behind? Anyone want to jump in? Anyone can jump in on the advice to Michelle, what to do if you're beginning to feel behind.
I can jump in. Last year, it's been about a year ago now, I got really sick myself. Actually, a little more than a year ago. We were moving across country, and then I got sick, and I was actually hospitalized for about 7 days. And
during the height of COVID.
Yes, during COVID. So my family moved, and I actually was left in the previous state while they had to move because we had housing closings and all that kind of stuff. But during that time, also, even after coming home, I had a long recovery time. I was not able to be there. I mean, I was not able to be present. I was just keep fighting for myself at that point. But thankfully, I was able to give myself that grace and mercy that Kristen talked about and recognize that this caught me off guard, but it did not catch the Lord off guard. And, his timing is not always my timing, and I'm not behind. And it's homeschooling. And that's one of the freedoms we have of homeschooling is recognizing that things intervene and life happens and things don't always go as planned and they catch us off guard, but not the Lord. He knows, and we're following him, we're trusting him, and he is guiding every step, even in those times. So I had to step back and just actually almost every day, because it was a battle for me. I mean, I would wake up every day and kind of that would smack me again of, here you are again, and you're not getting it done. And in circumstances that were completely out of my control, which also made me feel anxious because I couldn't control that. So again, knowing also that thankfully masterbooks is the majority of our curriculum, and it was very easy to follow. I just told my kids, just do what you can. You might not be able to get through the math pages today, that's okay, but you can do your history, or you can do your science, and when I can get to it, I can. But it took us a little longer, but only because I had put things in place. I was the one that caused us to be, we weren't behind, only in my mind, only in my expectations and my goals. No one else had set those on us because we homeschool. It was just me. So I had to relax myself and realize, who am I comparing to? Who's saying I'm behind? Where is this coming from? Because it's our homeschool, and we finished the year. They're all fine. We didn't necessarily finish when I wanted to finish, but that was okay as well. It was just, I had to realize my expectations at that time were being unreasonable, and it did not catch the Lord off guard. And I just needed to trust him and trust what he was doing in our life. And honestly, I needed to slow down. I needed to step back. And if I needed to slow down even in our homeschool and step back and reevaluate some things even in our homeschool, and it forced me to have to do that. But then also it was an encouraging time, because it made me realize, because we had set so many things in place previously, there were things the kids still got accomplished, and it surprised me. Whereas I was thinking we were, way off track. Thankfully, because of the systems we'd already set in place and the training that we've talked about, training our kids and training them to just do what needs to be done and give us that time, we weren't that bad. It wasn't that bad, and we made it through. But I definitely just had to realize that it wasn't catching the Lord off guard, just me.
Yeah, I noticed, I think we're in a season of reevaluation. The systems that worked for us for 20 years don't work today because huge parts of our system have left. And so we're having to evaluate that. But systems take over. Like in a company, if you have good systems in place, when things happen, the systems continue to be the brain of the organization. And I think that that's important in a household, that the habits we develop, the systems that are in place. Kristen, I think, had a lot of wisdom years ago where she said 9 o'clock is school time. That's when we start. And there was a schedule of, pretty close to 9 o'clock or whatever time, here's your daily schedule, and trying to keep on that, because when life does happen and something requires, there's a system to kind of keep that going. And Kristen doesn't, the 18 months or however long that she went through chemotherapy, our family needed the systems because they were relying on me to be the brain of the family, and that wasn't happening. So because that's not, when you're working and not in the home all the time and stuff, you need systems. So it really does come in handy. So I like that word as well. Okay, so Jess, we'll end with this question. Jess says, my oldest kiddo is currently in 8th grade. She's kind of bummed that I want to homeschool her through high school. She loves homeschooling, but is worried that she was going to miss out on so much. What would your advice be to give her peace about homeschooling through high school? I was public schooled, so I don't know how to give her that comfort and peace that she won't miss out. And I'm going to start with you on that.
For our family, we picked an activity that all of our kids liked, and that was archery. And we have a homeschool group that we do archery with once a week from September to May. And the kids get to see friends. They've made friends, built relationships, and that's our thing. Now, we've done like Little League and different things like that in the past that just didn't work because our kids would be on 3 different teams. One kid would be traveling, one kid wouldn't, and we could not split ourselves that many times. So we really tried to find things that all of our kids could participate in, that we could all be a part of. We have always homeschooled. My kids never had a choice whether to homeschool or not. That was just kind of what we did. It was what God called us to do. And we just said, hey, this is it. I let my kids pick their courses or a few of their courses, electives, and that has helped. I have a science-minded son who loves to read science books. He loves to read the three cults and religion books, and I just let him read those. I just play off his interests and cater to those. I have another child that has other interests, so we kind of do a lot of interest-led things for them, and that really helps, and it helps us stay where we need to be, but also it allows them to have some say in their schooling.
So it's kind of like a giraffe in the zoo, 3 giraffes in the zoo is public school, or the giraffe out in the Serengeti running free and wild is a homeschooler. You're able to do what you want to do versus in a cage getting your bale of hay and having someone clean up behind you.
Absolutely.
Jessica, how about you?
So I would say that with an 8th grader, I think the answer is different when a 3rd grader says something like this to you than when an 8th grader or a high schooler starts talking to this, talking about these things with you. So I would take advantage of your 8th grader kind of opening up to you and saying, hey, I'm concerned. I want to go back to public school I want to go to public school because I feel like I'm going to miss out on so much. Well, I wouldn't necessarily just go, well, this is this decision we've made, so this is the way it's going to be. Now, at the end of the day, is that the answer? Yes. But you can have a conversation, and I would take that as like a cue from your child to say, okay, let's have a conversation about what exactly is it that you think you're going to miss out on. So that way she can tell you, these are the 3 things that really matter to me, or that really, are things that I was looking forward to, that my friends are going to get to do, or people I know are going to get to do, and I'm going to miss out on those things. And then you can address those specific desires. Now, some of those things might be where you say, I'm sorry, but we cannot fulfill this desire, whether it's, you could even use scripture. There's sometimes when my kids might say to me that they want something in particular, or they disagree with, they might talk to me about like, why is this a rule in our household? And so we can look at scripture together on why we're doing things the way we're doing them. So sometimes that can apply, but sometimes kids think they can't do things that public school kids can do, and they can. So sometimes it's like, or even think about it from this aspect too, like sometimes we can be afraid to do something, and then you sit down and you go, okay, well, what's going to happen if you do it? Like, what's the worst? And when you actually start walking through things and talking through them, you start to realize, oh, it's not as big of a deal as what I thought it was. So I would think having a conversation with her where you kind of talk through what are the things that she wants. Some of those things might be just not possible, but some of them can be possible. Some of those things you can work to do and meet some of those desires that she has. But you never know if you don't have the conversation on what is it that she's talking about that she thinks she's going to miss out on. And that was something that, like when I was in high school, my parents kind of met me where I was at. When I would have those frustrations, they would say, okay, well then what is it that you want? What is it that you're going to get out of going to school? And we were able to kind of talk through those things. And at the end of the day, my parents were making the decision. Even if I was going to be upset, they were making the decision on what I was going to do. But kids get to an age where you do want to talk through with things with them. You don't want to just shut them down. And sometimes some of these things are things that you can figure out. There could be homeschool groups in your area that are doing the things she wants to do.
Yeah. Those are the moments that I like to say, what, you want to be locked in your locker? You want to be picked on? You want to be bullied? You want to you want to be pantsed at the flagpole? You want a swirly? Because I could take you in the bathroom and give you a swirly if that's what you want so bad. Like, that's what you're missing out on. Okay, Rachel?
Oh, goodness. So I have 2 that have now graduated, gone all the way through high school with homeschooling. My third one is now a junior, and my fourth one is in 8th grade. So I'm right there with you on those ages of that. And I would absolutely agree with Jessica. One of my children, she did go to traditional school for the first 7 years. And so she, this came up of things that she was missing. So I do agree. We couldn't just shut her down, because that honestly was going to just cause a problem in our relationship with us continuing on, and a problem with her entire outlook and attitude towards what we were doing. So we did have some of those conversations with her. And yes, many of those things we were able to meet within our local homeschool community. We were able to, depending on your area, if it's sports, that might still be available, whether it's through the school system or if it's through a local church, YMCA, different outlets have that. There are even just groups, co-ops that have homeschool sports, and whether it's just for a short amount of time. With our move that I already talked about, my boys previously were able to travel and do like basketball with a traveling basketball team that played only homeschool families played other schools. Then we moved here, that wasn't available. Then finally we found something, homeschool families only. It was just for 8 weeks. So it was a little different than what they wanted, but it still met that need. Just different avenues. Anna mentioned archery, so same thing for us. I have one of my boys that's something that he does, and so we were able to find that here with a local archery facility that actually has homeschool days where it's all homeschool families of different ages during different times. And again, you enroll and you go for their homeschool days. So you really kind of, as a parent, that would be what I would say. As a parent, you're going to have to start doing that research and investigating definitely after you talk with her and see what she's looking for, because those avenues are probably around you. You just don't even realize it yet. I know that's been the case for us. We've just had to search and do the research and find it. But there's many opportunities. Honestly, there was a point where I was like, we're homeschooling. When do we stay home? Because we have been going so much with, and especially during the time that I had all 4 kids at home and they were all 4 in different activities. We had to start actually scheduling days to stay home because there are so many things out there to do. So it's out there. She's not going to miss out. You just have to go and look for it. And I would say full circle now that my kids have graduated and they're looking back on it, they realize they didn't miss out on anything other than the things that Randy has mentioned about being trapped in a school building or not having say in what they were getting to study, the negativity, the drama of female drama that comes with that. Those are the things that they recognize that they actually missed out on. Looking back, it's not good things they think they missed. They realize they missed a lot of negative things, and they're totally fine with that. And they're actually thankful for a lot of that.
Yeah. Kristen?
I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach with it. First of all, I think that we need to recognize, especially depending on if our kids have gone to a traditional school or a private school, we do have to recognize that sometimes we have to work through the grief process because there are actual real losses. And so we have to have those discussions with our kids and allow them to grieve the things that really are losses to them. And we can't define what those losses are or whether they should be losses or not, but we can walk our kids through those losses. When we moved here, it was really, really hard. And there wasn't the things to replace what we had in New York. We moved to a very rural community, and where we are now, I'm a little bit excited about. I think that we'll have more access to some things, still exploring and trying to find them, but the kids did lose some things. And I think even in that, there's an opportunity to teach our kids to really press into the Lord and to seek his will and his desires, and to trust him when the things that we think we want aren't readily available now. And so, we don't always have the answers with the why. There's just going to be some things in life that we don't have the why for. And it's important that we teach our kids what to do when they hit these points where they really don't like it and they're not getting the things that we would like them to have or they would like to have. And how do they cope with that? And so I think that, all the things that everybody has said is all true and right. But there's also this flip side that sometimes it's just not what the Lord is doing. And we have to teach them how to cope with that too.
Yeah. I liked, when we started homeschooling, there was a lot of people who were just trying to prove that homeschooling was sufficient. And what they found was homeschoolers outperform their public school counterparts socially, academically, politically, like in every area, homeschoolers excel. And I really liked driving home the individualized part of the education, that we're able to tailor the education to fit your needs. And I can guarantee you, Jess, that if you do that, when your daughter graduates, she's going to excel above her peers because she will already know her giftings. If I give a one size fits all uniform and everybody looks the same, and then you go out into the real world and you have to figure out who you are. I mean, all of our kids have to do that to an extent, but each one of our kids, the one who was a mechanic, we focused on that. To the one who loved sales and communication, that was his bend. And every one of them kind of stepped into life better prepared. And while they still have to go through their trials and their tribulations of becoming an adult and going out of the nest, I still think that they're better at 20. They recover faster at 20 than they do at 13. And you want to, these lessons that they're not having to go through the social drama. And so there's so much of these things that really our kids, we pushed a heavy, you're an elite, like you get to be homeschooled. You don't have to be homeschooled. If we wanted to settle for less, we'd send you to public school. We sacrifice a lot to homeschool our children, and we pay a price. And there are places like West Point, different colleges, they actually want homeschoolers. I've had university professors tell me that they want homeschoolers in their classroom because they're just better students. And so this is a privilege. Jess, your daughter has a privilege right now of being homeschooled, and you're making sacrifices and you're paying the price. And this isn't punishment. This is you're getting a jump up on life that matters. And there's, while you may miss some things here, you're not going to miss the opportunities that come as an adult. And so just kind of setting the stage of there isn't loss. I mean, like Kristen said, there are some things that may have to be grieved, but leaving diapers is something I had to grieve. But to be in big boy panties also kind of helps move us into new places. I don't know why I use that analogy, but that's part of homeschooling is you're actually almost like an adult, like you're living like an adult life. You're working, you're getting to do things with adults, you're getting new things. You're not put in a classroom with a bunch of other kids your age and just fed what they want to teach you. You're getting to experience things more like an adult. So, all right. Well, this was fun. I don't think that there's an easy answer with Mary and Martha other than use masterbooks curriculum so that you get the best of both worlds. So everybody agrees, right? So, no, this is really fun. I like having the input of everybody because there are things that each of you said that I wouldn't have thought of to say that I think are really helpful. And we certainly appreciate this community and serving this community. I appreciate each of you for joining me today and being part of this and serving this community as well. I know how hard it can be to look into the eyes of the dragon 24/7 and still keep your sanity. And you guys have blessed this community tremendously. So thank you very much for that. So everybody, thank you. And we wish you well in your journey to enjoy the presence of Christ in your homeschool.